A genotype refers to the specific genetic makeup of an organism, an individual, I mean, a set of genes inherited from both parents. It encompasses the alleles, the variants of a gene present in an organism's DNA that contributes to its traits. For example, in humans, the gene for eyes color can have different alleles, such as one for brown eyes and one for blue eyes. The genotype will describe which alleles an individual has. Genotypes are crucial for understanding genetics, evolution, health, and individual differences in biology. And this is why I have brought to us today the story about genotype, love, and its consequences. Today's stories ravel around Nkechi, who has always been the kind of woman who believed in love above all else. Growing up in Imbise, Imo State, she had thought about the importance of compatibility in marriage. One of the most important things her parents emphasized was checking genotype before falling in love. It was a common teaching in many Nigerian homes. Yet, when she met and fell deeply in love with Kelechi, a vibrant young man from Isiopo in Ikwere local government, Rivers State, all that advice seemed to fade into the background. They first met at a mutual friend's wedding in Owerri, where they were both members of the bridal train. Kelechi's charm and humor had drawn her in from the start. He had an infectious smile, one that made her feel as though everything would always be alright. They danced through the reception and their connection felt like destiny. As their courtship progressed, they discovered they had shared a lot in common. They both had strong Igbo values, loved traditional music, and held similar views on life. However, one evening, as they discussed deeper issues about the future, the topic of genotype arose. Both were aware of the significance, both knew what it meant to be AS. The genetic changes were a terrifying 25% possibilities of having a child with the dreaded SS genotype if they marry and had children together. Nkechi's parents were the first to voice their concerns. Nne, love is not enough, her mother said, pleading with her to reconsider. Her father was more direct. Do you want to condemn your children to a life of pain? Think carefully, Nkechi. Kelechi faced similar opposition from his family. His mother, a firm woman with traditional values, warned him. There are many good women out there. Kelechi, you cannot play games with fate. His father too voiced his fear, though in a gentler tone. But love, as it often does, blinded them. They believed their love could conquer anything and they would be the exception. That perhaps, just maybe, they would be lucky. After all, they rationalized not every AS couple had children with sickle cell disease. Ignoring their families' concern, they moved forward. Their wedding was a grand ceremony, a grand celebration, a union between Mbise and Ishopo, where friends and relatives from both regions danced in joy. Their love was the talk of the town, and their marriage, at least in the early years, was bliss. They traveled, built a home together, and found joy in each other's arms. Nkechi would always say, we chose love and love chose us. But fate, silent for so long, reared its head when their first child, Chimeka, was born. He was a handsome baby boy, full of life. However, after a few months, they noticed something unsettling. He cries often. His cries were too frequent, and his body was often frail. Countless trips to the hospital followed, and their worst fears were confirmed. Chimeka had sickle cell disease. His tiny body would be plagued by frequent pain crises, fever, and anemia. The doctors gently explained the lifelong struggle ahead, but nothing could have prepared Nkechi and Kelechi for the reality. The pain that Chimeka endured was excruciating. There were hospitalizations after hospitalizations, sleepless nights filled with cries of anguish, and helpless moments when all they could do was to pray. Despite their efforts, the burden of caring for a sick child began to weigh heavily on their once joyful marriage. Then came their second child, Amarachi, a girl just as delicate and beautiful as her brother. Hope flickered briefly, but soon they were devastated to learn she too had inherited the SS genotype, another child condemned to a life of suffering. As the years passed, their children's constant need for medical care drained them emotionally, physically, and financially. Chimeka and Amarachi were often too weak to play like other children. They missed school frequently and their social life became limited. Friends and family who had once envied Nkechi and Kelechi's love story now whispered in hustled tones about the couple's foolishness. The strain began to tear at the seam of their relationship. Kelechi, once full of laughter and optimism, became distant. He would spend more time outside, avoiding the chaotic home filled with medicines, doctor's appointments, and cries of their children. Nkechi, overwhelmed with the day-to-day care of the kids, started to resent him for not being more present. The fights that followed were intense, full of accusations, guilt, and regret. "You knew this could happen," Nkechi would cry. "We both knew," Kelechi would shout back, his voice filled with frustration and sorrow. Their love, which once felt invincible, was now drowning in the sea of their reality. The very thing that had been warned about, the potential suffering of their children, had become their undoing. The impact rippled beyond their home. Friends who had admired their courage and defiance began to avoid them, unsure of what to say or how to comfort them. Nkechi's parents, though heartbroken for their grandchildren, could not hide their "we told you so" attitude, which only deepened Nkechi's guilt. Kelechi's family too offered no comfort. They reminded them and distanced them, believing that Kelechi's marriage to Nkechi had been a mistake from the start. In the end, the emotional weight proved too much for the couple to bear. Their once loving home became a battleground for resentment, with the children caught in between, despite their efforts to salvage what remained. The constant hospital trips, the financial strain, and the overwhelming guilt broke them apart. Divorce, once unthinkable, became their only escape. Their separation was a quiet, painful affair. There was no dramatic ending, just a slow dissolution of a love that had once burned so brightly. Nkechi returned Sumbinse with the children while Kelechi moved back to Isiopo. They would co-parent as best as they could, but the bond they once shared was irrevocably broken. Their story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of a real and heartbreaking consequences that could arise when two AS genotype individuals ignored the risk. The children, Chimeka and Amarachi, grew up battling their illness, living in a world of constant pain, hospitalization, and limitations. Though they were loved deeply by both parents, their lives were marked by the consequences of a decision that had been made in the name of love. In the end, Nkechi and Kelechi learned that love, while powerful, cannot always conquer biology. The price they and their children paid for their love was higher than they could have ever imagined. Genotype testing before marriage is often required or encouraged due to its crucial role in preventing genetic disorders, particularly those inherited through autosomal recessive inheritance such as sickle cell disease and thalassemia. Before marriage, here is why it is important to test for genotype. First is to prevent genetic disorders. Next is to enable informed decision making. Genotype testing gives couples the information they need to make informed choices about marriage and family planning. 3. In order to reduce public health burden, genotype testing is required before marriage. Widespread genetic disorders can place a significant burden on healthcare systems due to the need for lifelong treatment and management of conditions like sickle cell disease or thalassemia. By encouraging genotype testing before marriage, societies aim to reduce the incidence of these disorders and their associated healthcare costs. In order to avoid emotional and financial strains, couples should be able to avoid the challenges of raising children with genetic disorders, which can be emotionally and financially demanding. And lastly, cultural and religious encouragement. In some communities, especially in parts of Africa and the Middle East where sickle cell disease is prevalent, genetic or genotype testing before marriage is either legally required or strongly recommended by religious and cultural leaders. This is done to promote healthy families and prevent the hardship associated with genetic conditions. So, with this today, I would like couples out there to understand that love cannot equate the consequences that come with ignoring genotype testing before marriage. So, thank you for joining in. Till I bring you another video, do enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.